specifics of the plan that are before you to reduce our expenditures. There were 4 and there are now 5 major components to this plan that we've been working on really for about 5 months now. The first was the hiring freeze that we mentioned, which has already generated approximately $1.2 million, which is in the savings plan. The second are some reorganizations of departments and reductions of executive personnel and increased efficiencies that Mr. Tulloch, Assistant City Manager Tulloch, will talk about shortly. The third is the early retirement program, which the council has reviewed at its first reading and will be back before the council shortly for its second reading and hopefully approval. We are recommending approval of this program. And then finally, and the most controversial, which I'd like to spend some time on, is the fourth leg of this program, which is the departmental budget reduction. The fifth stage, which was just authorized by the City Council when in closed session, was an authorization to allow me and the management team to reopen negotiations with our labor unions to discuss possible ways that we can further close our budget shortfall. That will be happening shortly. The budget reduction plan that you have before you covered all major departments, all employees, and basically it's a result of a request that I made to the department heads to reduce their expenditures by 10%. That's the list of 195 cuts that we'll be discussing in detail later this evening. But I wanted to analyze that list that came forward because I believe that the list is balanced. It cuts across all departmental lines. It cuts across all major departmental groups. And I think it effectively reduces our expenditures while it allows us to maintain the quality of our core services. The slide before you shows where the reductions in terms of personnel will occur. This plan, which reduces the overall annual budget by approximately $14 million, results in a layoff of 107 positions. This is of a workforce of 1,243.5 positions. This shows you the breakdown of how that those position eliminations are distributed. Between confidential employees, there's a 13% reduction in the number of those employees. The representative group, which are engineers, also has a 13% reduction. Those are the 2 highest reductions in the plan. Again, those are relatively small numbers of employees, but they're significant numbers of position eliminations. The management group, right behind that, is reducing the number of management positions by 12%. The Chula Vista Employees Association, which represents our civilian unions, is realizing a 9% reduction, as is the International Association of Firefighters that represent the uniformed firefighters, approximately a 9% reduction there. And finally, the Police Officers Association is losing 2% of their members under my current plan. The distribution of those 104 layoffs, it's important to recognize, are split between vacant positions. Of the 104 that we're talking about, 40 of those positions are vacant, so we'll be eliminating positions that don't have anybody currently working in those positions. We are projecting 25 of those positions will be vacated by people taking the early retirement program, which leaves a real potential layoff number of approximately 35 people that will actually be separated from the organization. Now, one of the wild cards in this, or there are 2 major variables which could affect that number right now. The first is the actual number of people taking the early retirement program, which we won't really know until after the council approves it and the employees begin to exercise that option. And third, what the results of our discussions with the labor unions will be in terms of our negotiations. But that's the distribution among the 104 layoffs. We're actually talking about 39 real people that will be separated. In terms of what was proposed by the departments, this is a list of what each department submitted as their budget reduction. Remember, I asked for a 10% reduction in expenditures. On top of that, we added in some one-time expenditures. So this shows the actual amount of cuts that were submitted by each department. These are the total of the 195 cuts that were submitted by the departments, 1 through 95 that are on the list that you see before you. And this shows where those dollar amounts came from. The next slide shows the actual recommendations by the budget review team of the dollar amounts by department. After we evaluated them and we ranked them, remember the budget review team went through each of the 195 cuts and ranked them based on the impact to the community, the feasibility of making these cuts, and what was the third one?
There's also the dollar amount of savings in the departmental rank.
The dollar amount of the savings. So we had a specific formula that we used, and whether it was a core value, and whether it was a core value to whether it was a core service to the department. So there were a number of specific evaluations and formulas that went to evaluating these, and this is where the cuts came out. And I think that the distribution of these cuts and where they were made in the organization is I feel it's fair. It reflects the core services of the organization, and I think it spreads the burden of the cuts evenly among all the departments.
Mr. Garcia, Mr. Bowman has a question.
Just one quick question, David. In the guidelines to the department managers or chiefs, was there a guideline provided that any proposed recommendation within their various recommendations not to exceed a certain dollar amount?
There was a recommendation that it not exceed $250,000. That was a guideline.
Thank you.
It would at least be adhered to.
But it was part of the direction.
It was part of the direction.
Thank you.
And we did allow, I asked the department directors to be responsible for making these cuts. My expectation is that the department directors for the various departments are the experts in the operation of the department. I hold them accountable for the operation of what they do. And if we're going to cut out of that department, then I rely on the department to put those cuts forward and to make recommendations that while they may not like them or want to make those cuts, they will do it in the way that maintains the integrity of their core services and still allows them to do their job. So I really didn't nitpick with them about the things that they put forward based on my confidence in their professional ability.
Hi.
This is the way the actual cuts broke down in relation to the actual dollar amounts adopted by the budget. We have $165 million general fund budget this year. Generally, those are the breakdown among where our money is allocated. 45% of that money goes to public safety, 29% goes to development and maintenance, administrative and legal is 15%. The right-hand graph shows the cuts that are currently recommended on the cut list. And you can see that compared to 45% of the overall budget going to public safety, 34% of the cuts are recommended in public safety. Development and maintenance is being cut by 29% versus its allocation of funds equaling 9%. That administrative and legal services are pretty much equal to their allocation. You can see where those cuts line up.